Thank you for being with us today. Glad to see you all. Your participation and contributions as members and leaders in ACRL are of tremendous value, and each of you play really important roles in our success with the association. So I'm really grateful for your time and your commitment. The Leadership Council and Membership Meeting is a forum for us, for the board, for our ACRL committee and section leadership, and for our members to all connect. And it's an opportunity to learn about various ACRL initiatives and to provide valuable feedback that will help us to shape and guide the association's work. So to those ends, today we will hear from our goal area committee leadership. We will receive some updates on the work of two of our task forces, and then we will have some discussion regarding ACRL membership. So with that, I will turn it over to our goal area committees, and you will have received in your packet with the agenda some one-pagers that our goal area committee chairs and leadership prepared. And this is an opportunity for us to talk about what they shared in those reports, and also to solicit some conversation on the most impactful thing on which the goal area committees have been working on. So are there questions for any of the goal area leadership regarding their reports? All right. I will throw it to our goal area committee folks then, and my screen, it's going to be difficult for me to see you all at once, but who do I see? I see Amy. Maybe I'll just pick on you, Amy, if you want to jump in, talk a little bit about anything that's in your report, or give us your response to the most impactful thing that you've been working on with your group.
All right, thank you all so much. So I'm chair of New Roles in Changing Landscapes. So as you can tell in the report, we're a very busy committee. So we have 8 subgroups that are within New Roles in Changing Landscapes. And so it was really difficult to pick out which project was really impactful. But with that being said, it really created all these new opportunities for advancement, like in leadership, EDI, OER, landscape design, and just other ventures, creating space, like library space. One of the things that we tried this year that was really impactful was having a space for everybody to connect, not just in our meeting that we normally have once a month, but the impactful part of that was they had Zoom the breakout rooms that were very impactful because they were allowed to have time within our structured meeting to meet with their fellow members that are within that particular team. And we felt that was really something that was missing before, because we would just have report outs. And so this actually gave them a space to continue the work they were doing in the time that they were allowed, and not having that much more time outside of that workspace to really develop that. But we also felt this year one of the really impactful project was the toolkit, the academic library advocacy toolkit. And we felt that was really impactful just because we also worked with Val on that. And so that really allowed us to combine our forces, and we were able to take, really looking from one committee to another committee and being able to work with that. But we do have other things are listed that have been very impactful, but I think just communication and the toolkit has been really impactful current projects.
Great, thank you so much, Amy. The next person I see is Jay. Hey, Jay, you want to talk a little bit about EDI?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much. So we sort of tried to tie our update as well as thinking about this idea of the sort of impactful project the committee has been working on with our 3 major work plan goals as well. And those are all, we kind of realized, and I imagine, you know, something similar was going on with new roles and changing landscapes. So much of that intersects, right? And so many of our objectives had sort of overlapping areas of impact. We continue to be working on our biggest project is sort of transitioning into being a liaison and clearinghouse for all of the EDI activities across ACRL, so that people really feel a sense of connection about that, so that we're avoiding, you know, over duplicate, you know, too much duplication of work. And in some places, you know, we feel that's appropriate. But, you know, really feeling like people know where they can go for information about this, connected to other, you know, people who are really committed to it. So we're kind of moving into that. And so we are also then really interested in how how to kind of connect and communicate. So we're shortly sending out a survey about people's engagement in this. And then we're also supporting the ACRL board in a webcast about the new area goal that was developed fall of last year. For this purpose. So a lot of things in the strategic plan that we're hoping to kind of, you know, continue implementing.
All right, thank you so much, Jay. Scrolling through here. I think Youngmi, I think I see you next.
Hi, Erin. Hi, everyone. My name is Jungmi Skulis. I'm the chair of the Value of Academic Libraries Committee. As Amy mentioned, our committee also had a very hard time choose what is the most impactful project. And some of the project actually will be collaborate with new Changing Landscape Committee as well as EDI Committee. So as I indicated in the report, I'm going to highlight two things. One, as Amy pointed out about the library advocacy toolkit. So that's the tool that library workers can use to advocate for their jobs. So we launched last February, and at the time we wondered who the administrator will take over the toolkit for the maintenance or update those information. So leaderships of the VAL and the NRCL agreed to form, jointly work together to maintain and promote those toolkit. And in terms of the content, since we launched, we added the success stories pages to the toolkit, and also based on the information or feedback from one of the working group members who facilitated a discussion forum during the ACRL conference, we included those 4 stories updated. And also since last 2.5 months, there were more than 6,000 views already we have. And we wanted to actually further monitor which content were themes, because we have 6 themes are located under the toolkit, and we want to actually know which content is more popular. That will help us to promote or update those information as well. So the other one is the assessment proficiencies subcommittee, which is led by Becky Croxton. We complete the first draft of the updated proficiency, and now the proficiencies are in the final review period, requesting feedback from various stakeholders in higher education. So we are recruiting those feedback starting yesterday to May 5th. And a final draft will be shared with the ACRL Standards Committee in May. And then this will be presented to the ACRL board members for approval during the ALA conference. So those are our, in addition to other many nice projects, these are the 2 things I wanted to highlight on behalf of the VAL committee. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you so much. I think next I see Melissa. Melissa, want to jump in?
Yes, hello. Good to see everyone. I'm here representing the Student Learning and Information Literacy Committee, and I'm going to use my time to talk about our work a little more theoretically. So we've got some major accomplishments that you can find in the packet, but I think one of the things that has really been a focus for, we call it SLIC for ease of speaking, for the SLIC group is just the idea of intentionality and transition. So we've talked a lot about this year, the fact that the framework has been around for a while. People are starting to kind of make additions. We know that there are areas that we would like to see the information literacy framework grow, social justice being one of those aspects. And our committee has been focusing a lot over the last couple of years on inclusive and equitable pedagogies. And so we've sort of been using that as a launch point for thinking a little more intentionally about how the framework is used in the teaching practice of librarians and how our committee can support that work. And so I think over the last year or two and continuing into the next year and probably well beyond the next year is thinking a little more carefully and I'll say strategically, but I really mean more carefully about the work that we're doing in SLIC and how that can best support teaching librarians. And so we want to try to be very intentional about the programming that we're offering and make sure it's meeting those goals for increasing the pedagogical practices related to DEI and social justice and those areas that we know the membership is very interested in and is probably more important than ever. And so we're kind of rethinking our structure and the type of work that we're doing. And so I feel like this year we maybe don't have as many a really long bulleted list of things that we've done, but it's because we're really thinking carefully about what work is useful for our committee members, but then also, again, for the ACRL membership and to help advance the area goals. So I think that's kind of just a marker of where we are right now in our profession and in higher education in general. And so we're really thinking about how we can reflect that in SLIC.
Thank you so much, Melissa. And now I see Sandra. Sandra, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sandra Aya-Inamil, and I am the chair of the Research and the Scholarly Environment Committee. I apologize for not having a one-pager together, but hey, I'm here today. The updates that we have are around that we have done a very good and strategic update on the Scholarly Communication Toolkit. There is, we added a tab for diversity that's still in progress, and it's still in progress. So we're still working on it. But everything else is up to date and live. And I have heard feedback that it's been quite useful for folks. So I'm glad about that. Something I wanted to make sure to update this group on is the Spark Forum that has traditionally taken place during the annual meeting. Will not take place this year during the annual meeting. The date is to be determined, but it will not be during ALA this year. It'll likely be virtual and held in July or August. We'll try to send as much information as we can and make sure that people are aware of that change. We were originally scheduled on the schedule for the annual meeting, but we had to make that change due to Spark and the needs of their speakers. And it was really well attended last year also as a virtual event that happened in August. So we're going to continue with that. But I just wanted to make sure to say it this year because I think there was a communication breakdown and it didn't get out to as many people as it should have last year. So I want to make sure that folks have heard that, at least for me, early enough before the June meeting. Some of the impactful projects I think that we are working on there is a special CNRL issue about the 2019 research agenda that is being helmed by Cara Malafont, Amanda Nichols-Hess, and Nathan Hall as editors. And it is going to ask for feedback from people who receive grants or have some kind of impact from the 2019 research agenda. And so I think that is going to be really spectacular work, and they are on track and on schedule to have that published in 2024. So I think that will be pretty awesome. I think another project that has been impactful is our relationship with Spark and also the Open Access Working Group, especially in light of many of you may be familiar with the Nelson memo that was released in August of 2022, calling for the release of the open access of federally funded research by 2025 without embargo. And so, you know, the work that this committee does in partnership with Spark and the Open Access Working Group, I think is probably one of the big impacts that we have as part of this community. That's it for me. Thank you for the opportunity.
All right, thank you so much, Sandra. All right, we'll open back up for questions, or if there's any particular feedback that our goal area committee chairs would like to solicit from our attendees, it would be an opportunity for our chairs to ask some questions as well. So I'll pause there for questions. Jump in or put it in the chat, however you can participate.
I'll jump in with a question. I just, I've been to several of these board meetings and really appreciate the opportunity to talk about the committee's work. But I would love to hear from the board what kind of things you're looking for the goal area committees to do to make an impact, or are there certain activities that you wish you saw coming out of the committees, either as a collective or individually?
I love turning it back around, Melissa. It's great.
Teacher trick.
I love it. I love it. Board, anyone want to jump in? Jay, go for it.
Thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Melissa. That is a great question. So one of the things that we've been talking about is the plan for excellence, and it was formulated initially back in 2011, I think, and now we're looking at it again to see what still applies and what doesn't, perhaps. And so, I mean, some of you had mentioned the age of the plan. I was just wondering, Melissa, what are there things about the plan for excellence that are a bit harder as far as objectives to achieve, or are things moving along smoothly? I'd just be curious about that.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I haven't, Jay maybe has something to add to that. I was just gonna say that I'm not sure that we have thought about it, at least on my committee. I'm not sure that we've thought about it in that way, but more just thinking about, and we definitely we could look at it a little more carefully, point by point, but I think just more in general of where we're sort of sitting in the profession and in the world right now, that everything just feels kind of fundamentally different. And so thinking about the way we approach our work and how as an ACRL committee, we can support other people in doing the work, right? So like we have initiatives that help see the plan of excellence forward, but then what does that look like for everyone else that doesn't have the, fortune to be on one of these committees? So how can we kind of make those connections a little bit more explicit and help people feel connected to the plan in a way that I think everyone's just feeling a little like needing something to hold on to a little bit right now. And maybe that's one thing that could happen. I will also just say, I see Beth asked a question about difficulties, and I'm sure the other committee chairs will join me in saying people are still really tired and it can be very difficult to get people to participate. And I think at some point, hopefully that won't be such an issue, but it's definitely seems to still be an issue.
Julie, are you responding to this line of conversation or?
I was going to answer Melissa's question, but I think that Jay and Sandra might be wanting to answer Jay's question. So why don't I defer for the moment?
Okay, gotcha. All right, so over to you, Jay.
So much going on. I actually, I'm in this discussion now, and I guess I'm trying to make the connection, which is that, you know, my committee just made ours last fall because of being a relatively new goal area committee. And it was a really, if the process filled me with insight and was a really wonderful time for reflection in our committee. And I think it would be neat to, you know, have a confab or something with other, you know, committee leadership. And obviously it doesn't have to be anytime soon, but, you know, as we reckon with and acknowledge just how changed visibly the world is. I don't know necessarily that it wasn't changed before, but you know, knowing that, I think that could be a really neat exercise for people who participate in these committees. I will say, I think, yeah, that perennial question, because we, as this committee specifically has attempted to move into this sort of liaison clearinghouse model and really focus on relationship building as a way to support equity and inclusion across the association, and that, you know, we can encourage this model of interactivity and connectivity and accountability for libraries, library workers in their partnerships with the community and their partnerships with each other as peers and colleagues and co-laborers. You know, as we're encouraging all of this, that question about connecting, you know, every ACRL member or even library worker who may not be a member, but as something that is kind of aspirational, but that is really authentically applicable to each person who works in this discipline. So I think we're trying to think about how to make that happen. So I really appreciate you surfacing that question, Melissa. Thanks.
Amy.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to just say
Oh, I'm
something.
sorry, Sandra, you
No, it's okay.
disappeared off my
took it
screen.
down preemptively. But I just wanted to say that +1 on, you know, people being tired and overburdened already. And I, you know, one of the chairs mentioned, you know, having something in terms of like more engagement during the meetings as a way to like facilitate relationship and connection. And it's like, oh man, that's really great. I'm my term in, so, you know, I'll suggest that to the next chair. But I, you know, that would have been great, but it feels like, you know, it feels like a lot of pressure to have the meeting. So it's like, you got to make sure that you get all the information out, you make sure that people are getting the support that they need. And you don't want to have too many of them. And so, you know, it's kind of a challenge to like make sure that you still are fostering the connection among people that really want to be connected. And it can also be challenging on the committee because it's not clear, I think, and I've said this before, but it's not clear to the chairs why people are a part of the committee. I mean, you know, there's a way, I guess, once we get them in the room that we can talk about that, but we don't know that beforehand before they're on the committee. And so that's something I think that just needs some finessing. One thing that was mentioned in the meeting that we held, we had a meeting in February, and one thing that was mentioned was trying to talk to people about like where scholarly communication sits within institutions and trying to help people determine like whose job is this supposed to be. Not every place has a dedicated scholarly communication person, and yet those of us who are at, you know, research institutions are really going to be impacted by things that are coming down the pipe you know, in terms of scholarly communication, open access, publishing, federal funding, all of that. And so like trying to have people understand like where should they be looking for expertise? Where should this be in their organization? Who should be managing it? Because you have people who are like, everybody's responsibility. And it's like, is it? So yeah, so it's just like trying to understand how we can be of service and useful. I mean, I think we do so through the toolkit. I think we do so through some of the road shows, but which have been a bit stalled because of the pandemic and other things. But just trying to figure out like how we can be of service to a community that we know needs us, but we're just not sure how we can be helpful.
Thank you, Sandra. We'll go to Amy, and then I'm afraid we're going to have to move into the next agenda item. We can circle back if we find some time at the end, but let's go to Amy. Over to you.
Thank you. I'll just kind of be quick since I know we have quite a timeline with our agenda today. But yeah, I echo what they absolutely said. And I think maybe it might be helpful with a pre-assessment type of survey. I just love pre-assessment surveys. I feel like I do that a lot. But really to know, you know, what they're, you know, getting into with this particular committee. Why did they want to join this committee? And really just getting some background on people who are in our committee, because oftentimes we have new people rolling on. We don't know anything about them, like what is their background and why did they want to be part of this particular committee? So with ours and new roles and changing landscapes, it really is the driving force is that workforce is really thinking about leading, managing, and embracing that change. That's why we have so many different subcommittee groups. But it would be good to know ahead of time, just with a assessment of, you know, why did you want to join this particular group? And it can be really short. And so that way we can be informed moving forward to really get those ideas of membership, I think would be helpful.
Thank you all so much. This is really great conversation, and I think something we want to return to in some form or another in the near future. So I really appreciate it. We do have some guests with us today, so I want to turn it over to John and Lori, who are co-chairing our task force on the awards process implementation. So over to John and Lori.
Lori, do you want to go ahead and start the conversation? Oh, did Lori have to leave us?
Her box is still here, but it's
she's,
blacked out, so I'm not sure what happened.
She's reconnecting.
There we are.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got thrown out there. And I need to apologize in advance. I have a cold today, so my voice is a little crunchy, but I'll do my best. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to Leadership Council today and to update you on what the awards task force has been doing. I just want to give you a quick review of our charge so that you're all in the loop and reminded about what we're up to. Our charge is to make specific implementable recommendations for streamlining ACRL awards processes, including establish standardized process, fundraising protocols, and standard consistent monetary award structure across ACRL, and to create new corresponding guidelines or procedures as necessary. We're also responsible for investigating feasibility of collapsing all awards into a new division awards committee, as well as other possible models. We're asked to ensure diversity, equity, and inclusion principles incorporated into all aspects of the awards program, and ensure that ACRL awards process aligns with ALA policies and awards procedures. You have up on the screen some information about our structure. The task force responded to its charge by creating 3 working groups. And you'll see the working groups on the screen and a little bit about what their charge and responsibilities are. We have 3 groups: the funding group, the scholarly and research working group, and the achievement awards working group. Each working group is being tasked to include equity, diversity, and inclusion in its work. The funding group is examining endowed awards and sponsored awards. The Scholarship and Research Awards Working Group is investigating the feasibility of one committee for this group of awards or other potential structures, and to develop uniform structures, excuse me, across the group of awards. The Achievement Awards Working Group is examining that group of awards for developing standardized administration structures and improving equity and uniformity of monetary recognition. Recommendations are also needed to be developed to modify existing awards or recommend new awards to broaden inclusivity of the Achievement Awards. So that's how we're structured and how we've been working for the past several months. Since we've established the working group, we've had a number of meetings. Let me summarize a few items that we've discussed. We question as a task force the feasibility of having a single awards committee and don't think that would work well. So that's an initial recommendation that we are pondering. However, we have had discussions about establishing a central committee to coordinate awards, policies, and procedures, and help units establish award criteria addressing EDI concerns. The Scholarship and Research Awards Working Group has discussed issues about what award functions can be given to sections and what should be done by a central committee. The Achievement Awards Working Group has suggested that the task force could develop division-wide guidelines and practices for awards. We have also had a discussion of staff costs and to support awards and reviewed summary information on finances and time commitment that was prepared by Chase Allis, the staff member who previously was responsible for coordinating the awards. We are hoping that Chase will be able to join us at a future meeting to talk about this in greater depth. Miranda K. Hensley, who I notice is on this call, was the co-chair of the previous ACRL Awards Task Force, and she joined us at our last meeting to help us understand their work and recommendations. We really appreciate that, Miranda, and got a lot out of that discussion and dialogue. So that's a summary of where we are at so far. I'm going to turn it over to John Lehner, who is going to talk about two other items that we've been working on in the working groups.
Thank you, Laurie. I'm going to briefly talk about work that has gone on at two of the working groups. And we think there are issues that have been developed by these working groups that are going to be very important in terms of shaping the recommendations of the larger task force. The first one is the Achievement Awards Working Group has reviewed relevant literature and produced a document called Awards Process Strategies for Equity. And they've described it as a brainstorming document at this point. The larger group has reviewed that document, and I think our response was very enthusiastic. They've suggested that they may continue to refine the document. It includes a number of really valuable strategies for improving award processes from the EDI perspective. And the working group had reviewed some of the relevant literature in the field about equity in awards processes and really have come forward with a number of very tangible suggestions about how we can strengthen and improve equity in the awards processes themselves. So I think that's going to influence our overall recommendation in terms of developing some division-wide standards and guidelines. I think we're probably going to include it as an appendix to our final report because it's very rich in information. The other working group item that I wanted to mention is going on in the discussions of the funding working group. And the funding working group at its last meeting had a discussion about some of the issues we're facing in terms of monetary inequities in the process. And of course, the awards are funded from numerous sources. A few are endowed. Some are funded by ACRL. Some sections are using funding. Some are basically funded by vendors. Because of the disparity in the amounts of the awards, it seems like we have a very fundamental equity problem. And it's a structural one that's just baked into the way the funding and budgeting is handled. The funding working group is going to bring our conversation forward to the larger task force. And we need to examine the possibility of standardizing the award amounts. Or we've also discussed, and we'll be bringing to the larger task force, the question of whether all of these awards should include monetary gifts. There are certain awards that are actually grants to do research, such as the ESS award. But the achievement awards, we have some serious questions about why there are monetary gifts associated with them. And having a system where we are handing out all of this money, not based on having a single consistent funding source, but kind of based on having all these disparate funding sources, really causes there to be a lot of apparent inequity in the system. And we think there needs to be a larger conversation about that. So the funding working group is going to bring that forward to the larger task force. And I'm hoping we'll have a conversation about that at the next meeting of the larger task force. And that's what I have.
Thank you very much, Lori and John. I'm really pleased with the progress to this point, and I'm so grateful that Chase and Miranda have been able to join in some of the process for that continuity from their part of the work ahead of this. So thank you. Are there any questions for John or Lori about the awards implementation process implementation task force?
Aaron, there's a question in the chat from Bonnie.
Yes, thank you. When do you think awards will be given out again? I'm thinking of the original timeline that we gave to the task force, which I think is to have a final report from the task force at the beginning of 2024. Is that kind of where
That's
Correct.
the time frame we're working on. Yes.
So, depending on the recommendations and how those are or aren't implemented, maybe as early as fiscal, what would that be then? 25 would be the first opportunity for awards to happen again.
I think that sounds about right.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the question. Are there any other questions for John or Lori?
I know you're all anxious to be able to give out awards again, so we are working as expeditiously as we can.
I'll ask a quick question because I know that there was some work that was either going to get started or has been started at the ALA level also regarding awards. Has there been any information from the ALA side on awards work, and anyone can answer this, I guess, who may know something?
Yeah, Jay could address this, I think.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. So they have ALA has established an awards cross-functional team, but I was in touch with them, and their work is, according to the contact, is independent of what we're doing. So there doesn't seem to be like that there will be any effect of the ALA process on the ACRL.
Thanks, Jay. Other questions? Looking in the chat from Carrie and WGSS, logistically for the sections, this timeline means we will have lost much of our institutional knowledge within the section about the awards process. Will part of this process help address this as we change practices? John or Lori, is that anything that's under discussion?
I think part of the goal of a central committee might be to standardize awards processes in a way that sections and committees could follow a similar process. So there's more continuity about how that work is done, more it'll be able to address some of the equity issues that we've been surfacing. So I think we will, I'm hopeful we'll come forward with something that would probably provide some guidance and make up for the loss of that institutional knowledge.
Thanks for the question, Carrie. Other questions? Feedback? From Richard in RBMS, besides published awards criteria, what sort of documentation is the committee generating that might help offset the loss of generational knowledge? Documentation you're considering?
I don't think we've gotten that quite that far down the road yet, but I suspect, for example, this equity strategies document is one example of something that I think would be will be useful as that comes together, and I suspect there will be other documentation that will assist, but we haven't gotten into the specifics on that.
And I would just note that an enormous amount of information and data has been collected by the previous task force, and we now have access to that. And there may be materials there that would be helpful to sections going forward, because some of it really was material that was directly provided by sections to help inform this ongoing work around the awards. So we may have to make some decisions about how we would make that available to sections to kind of help support their having some kind of institutional memory about their awards and how it's been handled in the past. I think Lori and I are hopeful, though, that our task force will generate some fairly substantive recommendations about processes, so that, I mean, part of our goal, I think, is to not have everything so dependent on unwritten institutional memory, and have everything surfaced in much clearer, more straightforward ways for the processes.
Yeah, thank you. And then we'll close things up maybe with, one more, let's see. An update to the membership coming soon, so folks know what's happening in the background. I would guess that, so the task force, we're expecting an interim report from them at ALA annual time, and I would expect around that time we'll have something a little bit more solid and refined from the task force, and that would be a nice opportunity to provide the update to the larger membership. And then, is there some plan for standardizing how money is handled for those awards, especially where vendors have helped to sponsor the honoraria or stipends attached to them? And I'll turn that back over to John and Lori, and we'll close this up.
I would say that there is not a plan yet, but I think we perceive there may be a need to do some work in terms of standardizing monetary awards. And again, I think there are some issues around, does ACRL really want to continue making all of these monetary gifts as part of their awards process? Some of these are larger questions really that the board, I think, is going to have to think about, because a lot of it has, I think the board needs to be managing relations with donors and these vendors who support various ACRL programs. There may be questions about how much the board really wants vendors involved in these awards when there are other needs that the association has when working with these kind of external donors.
All right. Thank you so much, Lori and John, for your leadership on this task force. And please extend our thanks to the task force members and the work on the working groups. I'm really pleased, as I said, with the progress and looking forward to the interim report this summer. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Okay, we will now turn to the other task force report we have from Trevor Dawes, who is joining us on behalf of the Member Accommodation and Compensation Task Force. So I will turn it over to Trevor.
Hi, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. And thank you, Erin, and others for the invitation to join you today. It's really great for me, and I'm sure my colleagues on the task force would appreciate hearing a lot of this conversation about, especially from the goal area committees and also from the previous task force report, that there's a lot of conversation within and across ACRL about social justice and equity, because I believe this task force will help move us along in achieving some more equitable practices across the association. So at its January meeting a year ago in 2022, the board approved the creation of the Member Accommodation and Compensation Task Force. And the charge of this committee is to review the current practices for when and how members are recognized for their time and effort dedicated to advancing the work of the profession, identifying advantages and disadvantages of these practices, and investigating the options for and sustainability of offering various forms of compensation and accommodation. A lot of words there, but ultimately the goal is to recognize and ideally financially recognize those who perform work for the association. And by this we mean those who are speaking for ACRL, conducting a webinar or giving a talk or leading a workshop, or all of those things that that some of you have probably done for the association. As you know, it is the policy of ACRL, the policy of ALA, not to provide any financial compensation for librarians if they are doing work for the association, and ACRL, I believe, is taking a leadership role in trying to change that. However, we must change that while still maintaining our fiscal self-sustaining ability, right? Or ability to remain fiscally sustainable. Interesting, to hear the report from the last task force where, obviously we can't do any of this without the appropriate budget that needs to happen, needs to change. One of the, I guess, maybe first things that the task force did was realize and recognize that we're really not talking about compensation, right? Because compensation is perhaps is not only a challenging word, but also the funding that may be available really isn't the type of funding that would allow for compensation. So we're really talking about honoraria. and other forms of recognition. And so we've been using the language of providing honoraria for those who are performing work for the association. We also are very grateful that even in advance of our report, which we plan to have a final report to the board before annual conference this year, but even in advance of our report with recommendations, ACRL and the conference committee presumably decided to begin this process of recognizing speakers by providing a discounted registration fee for the ACRL conference. So if any of you were speaking at the ACRL conference, as I did, you will know that you received a $50 discount on your registration. And this may sound, based on the cost of registration, that's not a lot of money. However, the $50 discount to speakers at conference cost the conference close to $50,000. So we're also grateful to the vendors and other supporters, perhaps including you, who made that possible for the speakers to receive that discount, but also a demonstration that there is a real financial cost to providing these honoraria or discounts or whatever it is that the task force will ultimately recommend. So we've had lots of conversations, and I think, as I just mentioned, we are planning to submit our final report with recommendations to the board in time for its meeting at annual conference in Chicago this year. We have a couple of recommendations that will include things like enabling sections to use their section funding to provide honoraria to speakers, although we recognize, just as with the last task force report, that because of the section funding model, there will perhaps inevitably be continued inequities in the ways in which honoraria are provided. And so, unlike the last task force, we were not charged with developing a budgetary structure. We were just making recommendations. So I notice, Joe Mocknick from the Budget and Finances on the committee, that'll be up to that group perhaps to think about, how some of these are implemented, assuming our recommendations are accepted. We also plan to recommend having a structured scale, if you will, of honoraria. So honoraria, the amount of the honoraria will be determined based on the scope, the quantity and scope of the work that is being performed. So for example, if I'm leading a half-day workshop, that may require a different level of preparation and presentation than if I'm leading a 1-hour webinar, right? So the amount of the honoraria would differ based on the scope of the activity being presented. So those are, I'm also pleased that many of you here, many of the section leaders sent a letter to the task force chairs, and my co-chairs, Anne-Marie Casey, sent a letter to the co-chairs in inviting us to make the recommendation that we were already planning to make, that sections be allowed to use their funding to provide honoraria, again, recognizing the budgetary constraints and the inherent inequities. But these are issues that, we'll certainly discuss, but others will ultimately have to grapple with and make decisions about. So I know Anne's responded to the section chairs who sent us the message, but we're certainly appreciative of the fact that your thinking was certainly aligned with that of the task force. So again, we plan to have our recommendation out soon, our report with recommendations. A final recommendation will be that if the recommendations are adopted, that they be publicized pretty widely, so that all members are aware of the changes in the ways in which ACRL will provide honoraria for members who are participating in conducting the work of the association. So I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions and or comments, and thank you for the time.
Thank you very much, Trevor. It sounds like there have been some really productive conversations with the group, and I'm anticipating that we're going to have a lot to think about, a lot to mull over when we see your report this summer. So really, thank you, and thank you to the task force members. Are there any questions or feedback for Trevor?
Sometimes these are the best reports when there are no questions. Hopefully that means everything was clear. And,
that's how I always take it. Like I just did it perfectly. So
right.
All right. Oh, here we go. All right. Thank you, Bonnie. Will the structured scale apply to librarians as well as non-librarians? Are you thinking about that?
So I believe it is I believe non-librarians already are compensated in some way. Correct me if I'm wrong, somebody. So, but if they're not, it certainly would apply to librarians and non-librarians. So thank you for that question. We'll make it explicit in the report.
Yeah, non-librarians are compensated, but I don't think there's a scale of kind of based on the scope of what they're doing. So that.
Yeah, and we'll take this back to the task force, but that may make sense to think about it in that way as well.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Bonnie. Any other questions or feedback? All right, well, we'll leave it there then. Thank you, Trevor, and please extend our thanks to the task force. Really grateful for the work that you're doing with that.
Thank you. Everyone's really excited about the work that we're doing as well.
That's great. I'm really glad to hear that. All right, everyone, we are at our break time, so we will reconvene at 10 after the hour. To talk with our section membership chair and have some discussion about ACRL membership. So please join us back here at 10 after the hour. All right, here we are, 10 after the hour. Thank you all for joining us. We are going to hear from Joyce, our section membership committee chair, to talk a little bit about section membership, and then we will have some breakout conversation. Please don't leave. Hang out with us, talk with us a little bit, where we'll have some discussion, a little bit more discussion on membership in general, section membership also, and how we can attract and retain members in ACRL. So with that, I will turn it over to Joyce. Thank you for being with us, Joyce.
Thank you so much for the invitation. Let me share my screen. Can everyone see my slides? Good, thank you. So hello, my name is Joyce Garzinski. I am the ACRL section membership committee chair. And I'm going to talk about some of the activities of our committees and of our section. So first, a little bit about our committee. Our membership consists of the chairs of each section's membership committee. So when you are selected to be the chair of that membership committee, this section membership committee becomes a bonus committee that you are on. And so, for example, I'm the membership chair of EBSS. And so I've been serving on this committee in that capacity. And we come together usually about at least quarterly, although in recent years it's been more often, where we share our best practices for member engagement. So a lot of times our sections are the first point of contact for new members. And we also are very innovative in what we do. We're trying new approaches and new ways to engage our members. And so we like to come together and talk about what we're doing and how we can support one another. We also participate in ACRL orientation events, and we're working more on documenting our best practices so that we can have some uniformity across sections. So first, I want to talk about some of the activities that our committees, our committee does regularly. And so these are activities that most section membership committees engage in. So first, we regularly send emails to new, dropped, and renewed members of our sections. So that is a practice that predates the pandemic. Since the pandemic, there has been a challenge in getting these lists of members on a timely basis. And so some sections have had to drop that activity or pause it. But we're starting to re-engage in that as new reports become available. We also regularly hold social and educational programs that are adjacent to conferences, such as we hold socials at ALA. We transitioned during the pandemic to do that virtually, although some sections are back to holding in-person socials and also holding virtual socials. And for the first time this year at ACRL, we hosted dine-arounds to give opportunities for members to engage in our sections as well. And we're really trying to refocus the events that we do to recognize the staff intensity that some of our activities have taken, and so to take that into account as well. I also want to speak about some of the innovations that are going on, especially to engage some of those pockets of members that we haven't traditionally engaged. So we're really starting to look more at informational events and resources for new members. How are we engaging members when they first come to us? So LES and ESS, the Literatures in English and the European Studies section, both of them are working on a new member handbook so that there are these resources at the ready for those new members. And the instruction session is working on member highlights and exploring your membership events. And so sort of forming those connections early on. We're also looking to engage some new segments of the member population. As we speak, my section, the Education and Behavioral Sciences section, is hosting a session for students focused on getting your first academic job and some of the challenges that go along with that. So we're really looking at who our members are and trying to provide events and programs that are impactful for all segments of our section. Also, as I mentioned, we're looking at documenting some of our best practices. And what we did most recently was look at the appointments process to our committees. Each section has a number of committees, and we wanted to document and share some of the best practices for appointments and encouraging people to volunteer for committees. For the first time, EBSS and ANSS held appointment drop-ins so that members could come and learn about the appointments process, how it's done, sort of peel back the curtain and show what that appointment process looks like. And we documented these best practices as part of a document that's on the section resources website, which I'll put that link in the chat in a little bit. So I'm hoping that we can talk about, the challenges we're seeing in light of the challenges we're seeing. How can we recruit and retain diverse membership? And so specifically here, let me stop my sharing. Maybe we can look at essentially a SWOT analysis of what hampers or helps our ability to recruit and retain diverse membership. So I have some sample questions that I'll put in the chat for our discussion today.
Okay, thank you so much, Joyce. This is really, really great information, and I think a lot of good fodder for further conversation. So someone's going to do the breakout magic. I'm not sure who's taking that, but we're going to do some breakouts. When you get to your breakout room, please someone raise their hand to take some notes. Those notes are extremely valuable to us in having additional conversation and taking action on some things. So we would very much appreciate a note taker in those breakout rooms. And then we'll have section leaders in all of the breakout rooms. And if the section leaders could please make sure conversation gets started and that everyone has an opportunity to participate in the discussion in the breakout room. So breakout magic will happen.
Yeah.
Pause it, Aaliyah.
We will give everyone just a minute to wrap up their breakout conversations, and then we'll have some larger report outs here. Hang out with me just for a few minutes or a few seconds. All right, welcome back to the main room, everyone. I hope you had some good discussion in your breakout rooms. and that you had a note taker. I think I said it and then immediately forgot it in the first group I joined. So hopefully you were better at that than I was. So we would love to have a few report outs from the breakout rooms. So whether you were the note taker or not, if you just have you know, a comment or a piece of feedback or something interesting or a question that was raised in your discussion, love to have you share it for the broader group to ponder and think about also. So I'll open it up there, and then if no one volunteers, I will volunteer someone.
This is Sandra Riggs. I can
Yeah.
volunteer. So I was with group 2, and we started to answer the question about what strength does ACRL bring to retaining members, but we also talked a little bit about the weaknesses. But in terms of strength, just the committee work providing opportunities for positive, welcoming experiences while having common projects and goals. A big one for a lot of people, the conference is so useful. No matter where you are in your career, it's incredibly useful. ACRL provides an opportunity for leadership that many times people don't have in their own job. You know, if you're coming from a flat environment, you may not have the opportunity to move up, but being involved in ACRL gives you that chance. So there's also so many people involved, but I would say the one thing that we all mentioned as a weakness is cost, which is why the BIPOC membership program is, and providing that paid membership for some people, it can be such a great opportunity.
Gerald, please. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, Gerald.
One of the things we talked about as far as challenges, looked at actually a larger picture of the profession itself and getting that a more diverse workforce, but just growing the workforce. So that means we would have to be more strategic in the way we well, just developing pathways for opportunities, talent pipeline, some of the things I wrote here, frontline staff, giving them opportunities. Somebody couched it as expanding the lens to connect to a more diverse workforce. And then there may be some overall perceptions of ALA and ACRL, maybe as being cliquey or maybe a little bit elitist or something along those lines. And also that's we're not doing maybe there's no efficient way to capture the actual numbers of librarians so that we could get a good statistical picture. I guess the librarians and paraprofessionals are often counted together, and so one of the options we would have would be to take a closer look at what the actual numbers are, so you can get a more accurate plan put together. Hope I said that correctly.
Thanks, Gerald. Yeah, Kara.
So I took notes by hand, and I will try to get these shared out. But the challenges that we talked a lot about were related to cost. Cost for joining the association, but cost for participating in the association in relation, especially to like librarian and library worker compensation. And also, I think that we need to realize, or we decided that we need to realize, that it's a pretty tough time, and a lot of people have more to do at work, which means less time to be active in ACRL. So that might be something that we want to think about trying to work on going forward is, if things change in a couple of years, how do we re-engage people? We also talked about, how we do have competition from other associations, and how to help people see the value in the broader ACRL organization when they have, opportunities for, smaller. And then there's the whole thing of ACRL being like a really great reputation nationally for being a leader for academic librarians, but that also means we're a really big organization, and it can be hard to understand and hard to navigate and kind of mysterious as far as like how you get involved and how you get appointed to things. And I know that, we do a fair amount of work to try and break that down, but clearly there's more to be done. So.
Thank you, Kara. Joyce.
I ended up taking notes for our group, Erin, so we're good. We're good. A lot of what we spoke about has already been said by other groups. I'll share my notes in the chat, but one of the things that we talked about as a challenge is the volunteer and appointment process for committees, in the sense of how do we know that we have committees that match the needs of our members? Also, the timing of the process can be challenging. A few of us talked about having to chase down people to try and get them to volunteer. And a suggestion was made that it might be helpful to take a look, to have a group, a task force look at the appointment process and some of the equity concerns around the volunteering and appointment process as well. So just wanted to share that.
I'll just jump in, and some of my board colleagues can also jump in. We had a task force that ran till the beginning of the year. It was the Nominations and Recruitment Task Force, if I remember the title correctly, and they gave us a nice report with many recommendations for how to address just what you were talking about, Joyce. Some of the ways that we can break down some of the mysteriousness around the appointment process, and how we can introduce new people into volunteering. And we're still taking a look at those recommendations to see how and where we can begin to do some implementation. But I just wanted to say that is something we have been thinking about and continue to think about with the recommendations for sure. Any other reports? Oh, okay. Yeah, Gerald.
Oh, there were other things on our report. I was trying to keep it short because I didn't want to dominate the time, but there were a couple other things that we talked about that I thought were important. So strength wise, there's the EDI committee and the network of expertise and tools that are provided by the organization. But it was commented that perhaps there's not enough visibility for all the work that the organization is actually doing. And the diversity of the speakers that we have at the events sends a good, I think, a good picture of what the organization is trying to develop. Also, there was some mention of technology of being a challenge, but also being an opportunity. some of the rapid, I had a hard time trying to figure out how to say this, but some of the rapid changes that we go through as librarians, as we adapt to those changes, they provide opportunities for us. So that's kind of a more esoteric concept, but that's something else that was brought up. And I think I'll stop right there.
Yeah, thank you.
You're
Other groups with anything to add? Questions that came up? Kara.
I have one more thing before we move on. We had a really good conversation around strengths and opportunities in ACRL, that there are plenty of opportunities for participation, that there's a place for every type of library worker. And it's a real opportunity. We thought that ACRL, if you don't see the place for the kind of, discussion or community that you want, that you can create it, and that we might want to think of ways to like capitalize on that going forward. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Sandra.
I don't think it was mentioned, but I apologize if it was, but we in our group where Jay took notes, talked about this move to collect fees monthly, and that how we thought that is a really exciting opportunity and could really bring some relief to some folks for whom paying all at, the fees all at once could be difficult. And so I really am very grateful that that's an option that's going to become available, and excited to see like what that might mean for folks for whom this has been a challenge.
All right, any others? Oh, yeah, Jay.
Thanks. And thanks, Sandra, for mentioning the new due structure, which I think it will be available later this year, maybe in December, where ALA will offer the option for monthly payments and also recurring charges, so that you don't have to keep remembering to pay every month. So this is a part of ALA's effort to make membership more affordable across the board. And Jay and I were in a session last week before last, where this was specifically mentioned as desirable, especially among students, to just try to make it more accessible. And one thing I wanted to mention to Joyce is that Erin and I learned about a new membership system called Amicus that should be able to provide real-time membership data. So we might, I'm hopeful, and I think this is for the beginning of next year, that we'll start seeing much more timely membership information, which I was really impressed with the efforts that the section membership committee had made before to reach out to members. So some positive changes that are happening at ALA.
Jay, will that connect, or could it connect at all to the volunteer database?
I'm not sure that'd be a good question for me to ask the membership group. There was some discussion, and this is where we have to be careful about making membership information more widely available, and that there's hesitance to do that in this current environment because opponents to, for example, freedom to read sometimes take that information. So they're going to be careful about the way that they connect it and make it available. So that's an unfortunate byproduct of our times.
Has any group not shared that wants to share? All right. Well, it sounds like there were some really great conversations in all of the breakout rooms. So thank you for that. I'm really, really grateful that you stuck around with us today and joined the conversation, and all of this information is feedback is really invaluable. So I really appreciate it. And if you have a link to share to your notes or your scanned writing, Kara, share. If you'll pass that along, I don't know who the best person to pass that along to is, Jay. Is there someone we could
Well, they can send it to me, be fine.
send it to Jay? You want to put your email in the chat just in case. And we do have a few more minutes, and I said that if we did, we could return to the conversation at the top of the agenda when we were with the goal area committee leadership and talking about the most impactful things they've been working on. And I think we had a couple of more hands up. If it was Youngmi and Julie, I think, if there was more that either of you or anyone else wanted to share in our last few minutes.
Thank you, Erin, for remembering raising our hands. So one of the question is, as you noticed, our Value of Academic Library committees collaborate with the goal level committee members. I think that the benefit of doing it is we can synergize our work to reach our goals. So like, for example, when we work on EDI, we can collaborate with the EDI committee as well, because we need their input in terms of the certain things. But at the same time, can be a little challenge for us, like since this is the two joint committee, and what are the best way to communicate effectively in terms of approaching the same goal? Because if one of the committee did not commit in a way or did not communicate each other, it'll be really hard to achieve the same goal or have a synergize their efforts in a way. So I'm wondering how the ACRL board members provide any suggestions, because that'll be also helpful, like if we don't see any things, like if there's any gap when we develop the strategic planning, and then what are the ways that you can actually join to those that missing and then collaborate together. So I asked two different things, but I would appreciate about that.
I guess if you don't mind, I'll sort of speak to what I was going to way back, and that was Melissa saying, what is it that you as the board members would like from all of Leadership Council and sharing, and I think it is to establish that collaboration, right, and that knowledge of what is going on across the different groups, so that we can minimize overlap and offer opportunities to do something maybe bigger than what a particular committee or section could do on their own. And I think that the thing that is difficult is bringing people together, finding some way to have that happen naturally and organically without always having board member or involvement, or necessarily having to have a charge, right, in those moments. But you raise a good point about what happens when there's not necessarily a good plan for how to move forward. And I would say that is the time that connecting with board liaison might be a good thing to do, so that we could talk through how to build that structure and get through the conversation in order to move toward an end product or plan for moving forward. I know that sounds simplistic, and we always have these great intentions of doing more early in the year. And I've seen it 3 years in a row, and here we are again in April, at the end of April, and thinking, oh, those are great things that we want to do. So it's just difficult because everyone is busy, as you have all mentioned. That doesn't answer your question, but that's sort of my ramblings for the moment.
It's a good question to ask, honestly. And I was thinking, one of the exciting things that I hear from the committees and the work that they do is when those opportunities to collaborate have presented themselves and something has happened as a result. And it's really got me thinking a little bit about how do we meaningfully inject support for that kind of work, and to what Julie was saying, so that there, not necessarily a board presence in the work, necessary, but even as something as simple as Connect, which I know not everyone loves, but how do you across the VALS committee and RCL, for example, find a space and Connect to collaborate? And I'm sure there are hosts of other things, but it's a good thing for us to ponder and consider, I think, particularly as we review the strategic plan again and how those goals are formulated and what kind of initiatives and activity do we want to see out of the plan and from the groups, and how do we logistically, but also in other ways, make sure that there are the things in place that enable that work to happen that way. Jay.
I really appreciated your question. I just thought that was so good. And I would just, it's putting me in mind of like, and I don't know how many of you work with undergraduate students, but when undergraduate students are encouraged to do collaborative group work, there's frequently like, develop some kind of shared understanding or contract, and it doesn't necessarily have to be contractual, but I'm thinking like, oh, there can be that moment where like maybe there's just, regular encouragement throughout the association where it's like, oh, if you're collaborating, like make sure you have that shared understanding of the expectations and the division of labor. Like, on Valor, the EDI committee, who's going to be doing what? Like, EDI committee, we don't have the resources, right, to necessarily know everything about assessment. But I felt really delighted to be asked to participate in like providing feedback from an EDI lens about the new proficiencies for assessment workers. And so it was just very exciting to kind of have an understanding. So I think that idea about like, what can we bring to this? What's our shared understanding for expectations? That's a conversation I like to have frequently.
All right, we have reached our last minute, so I want to, on behalf of the board, extend sincere gratitude to our committee and our section leaderships and our members who do so much with us. Really appreciate your contributions and your continued commitment to ACRL. And I hope you've found rewarding work this year, and that there have been opportunities that you've been able to take advantage of and leverage to be engaged in our offerings and apply them in whatever you're working on in your world. So I hope that you'll continue to join us in this work. And it's been so great talking with you all and seeing you all today. And with that, I will close it up. So have a great afternoon and hope to see you all again.